So the whole idea was the entire civilizational journey, right from the antiquity, from the Vedic period up to the current period, that whole thing can be studied in one single university. Unfortunately, even after a public ceremony and after the gift agreement was formally signed, some of the our Indian leftist faculty, they raised a slander that these are all Hindu fundamentalists with Godra, etc. The dean got scared and he established a committee in which again the same professors were appointed. And then they recommended that the Jain and the Sikh studies here should be maintained, but the Hindu studies should be scrapped.
So this is the thing going on. On the right-hand side, you see the total list of the authors whose books we have given to this cohort, 4 to one and 4 to the other. And other than Dr. Vivek Murthy, all the other authors, including Sanjeev Sanyalji, were kind enough to give us time and have a session with the participants.
Namaste, viewers. Welcome to another session of my sit-down sessions in Sangam Talks. I have with me Dr. Manohar Shinde and Shrikant Palkarji today. They both are from DCF, or the Dharma Civilization Foundation. And we're basically going to understand what DCF does and the impact of DCF in its purpose and objectives. Quick backgrounds. Manoharji is originally from Hyderabad. He did his medical studies here, then specialized in psychiatry, did his PhD in psychoanalysis, and for about 29 years, he's been practicing in the US. And Shrikantji has been in information technology for most of his career, 38 years, and has been working in different diverse business domains and is also part of Dharma Civilization Foundation. And so we'll dive right in and basically first understand from Manoharji, tell us a little bit about the organization first, a brief, and then Shrikantji will present, give us a presentation on DCF and tell us a little more in detail. Manoharji, over to you.
Namaskar, viewers. I'm thankful to Rahulji for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share some reflections on the DCF and its journey and its reason for its inception. In 2004, when I turned 60, I had a keen desire to develop some networking of scholars who have a certain Indic civilizational commitment. And accordingly, I had taken a tour of some 10 cities in India, visiting all the major think tank type of or intellectually oriented institutional efforts. Later on, the same effort I continued, meeting as many scholars and academicians as possible in US and then to some degree in Europe also. Finally, I decided in the spirit of the Vanaprastha, where at some point you stop spending your energies on earning, etc., and give back to the society and community in a more larger time commitment wise. So around age 66, in 2011, I took a final retirement from my private practice and my teaching assignment. And that is the time when there is a foundation here called Ubrai Foundation, which also works in trying to popularize the Dharma traditions in academia. So I was the chairman of the advisory committee for that foundation, and they had suggested me to organize a conference of scholars in Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount University. Some close to 48 scholars had come from around the world and around the continent. And that time, one professor, especially from Los Angeles, by name Professor Shiva Bajpai, a fairly better-known historian. He was a student under Bhasham from University of London, from UK, and later on he was on the faculty or head of the Department of History, Ancient Indian History at California State University, Northridge. So he and me had a series of conversation, and either some type of a Hindu think tank or some type of foundation was the two alternative possibilities we were debating, and finally decided that we like to create a platform whereby, at least more immediately, we thought of two principal ideas or goals. Number one, how to promote a spirit of academic philanthropy. What we noticed is that the Indian community, Hindu community in particular, is reasonably responsive to building temples. Over 1,000 temples they have built, according to some estimate. Over $6 billion worth of investment has occurred. Similarly, for various types of seva projects, both in India and in USA, also generously people have been contributing. Like for Ekal Vidyalaya, every year they are collecting $10 to $12 million for supporting single teacher school. Similarly, for Seva International also, same around $10 to $12 million. During the COVID, they were able to raise almost close to $40 million worth of resources. However, the awareness and the consciousness to create academic and strategic infrastructure for the current and the future challenges and for the positioning of the Hindu and Indian community seems to be relatively very feeble. So with that idea, motivating and inspiring the academic philanthropy, one goal. This, for example, almost like not only we need to build temples of worship, but we also need to build temples of learning, temples of knowledge. And we need to carve out some position in the mainstream universities. So that was, and how ultimately to try to initiate a process of building some academic and intellectual infrastructure, whereby some future generation of thought leaders or scholars or researchers can be created. There is an abundance of people who have been misrepresenting representing Hinduism in the American academia. It is rampant. I mean, maybe it's another topic we can sometime possibly take it up, whether it's Wendy Doniger and her tradition of over 40 PhD students writing all types of real, horribly distorted representation of Hinduism. But rather than complaining, we need to also say. So one idea was choosing some research universities. Research universities mean those which have a PhD granting mechanism and creating some chairs and thereby trying to establish some professors who are committed to the understanding and exploration of the true spirit of Sanatana Dharma, and thereby creating a network of young scholars who then can be seated or positioned in multiple universities so that we can ultimately, over the next maybe 1 or 2 decades, be able to transform the discourse. With that idea, finally, we, in the early quarter of 2012, it was registered formally in Los Angeles in the state of California. And the initial first project was, there are 2 major universities in Los Angeles. One is a state-funded called UCLA, and another one is a private university called USC. They are the 2 biggest and competitive major universities. So at USC, there is a Department of Religious Studies, and the head of the department was with a Buddhist background and very sympathetic for the bringing up a faculty position for Hindu studies. So and that was the time when Swami Vivekananda's 125th birth year was also being celebrated. It's around 2013-14, all over the world. And we negotiated that we will initially fund 2 years of visiting professorship, which should be named under Swami Vivekananda visiting faculty position in Hindu studies. And we would like to be at least co-partnering with the university search committee, whereby a professor who is genuinely empathic with not the mainstream narrative. So they agreed for that. And we also said that the university should be willing to host a international academic conference on the life and legacy of Vivekananda. And for that, from $20,000, they should put aside. There were multiple Vivekananda conferences that are being held all over the world, but probably rarely a major university holding an academic conference, which has very less often occurred. So they agreed for all those conditions. And within a matter of about 45 days, we raised some $120,000 from within Los Angeles Hindu community. Similarly, there is another university called University of California, Irvine, UCI. And there also, the dean was interested to have a Swami Vivekananda fellowship in Dharma studies. And what it was, that there is what is called the general education or GE courses for all the new entrants into the undergraduate level. And there you have to take a variety of courses. So there is a group of classes called Asian Studies. So the university agreed that we will do instead a GE or graduate general education in Dharma studies. So Swami Vivekananda Fellowship in Dharma Studies was initiated, and they started teaching Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. So those two projects were initiated, and we were also hoping to maybe reach out to different spiritual heads. For example, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, Shri Shri Ravi Shankar, and Amachi, and even Sadhguru, etc. And urging them that if we will partner with them, help them in raising funds, and a chair can be established on their name. And two people in particular were very passionate about it. Swami Dayananda Saraswati said that this is a very brilliant idea. We should really try to see whether we can build on that idea. So that time he suggested that maybe fund giving type of his contacts are relatively limited, but he suggested that there is a institution in Berkeley in Northern California by name GTU, Graduate Theological Union. And it is the largest theological school in USA, which have about 800 MA level students in religious studies and 200 PhD level students in religious studies, 9 Christianity denomination schools, and 1 Islamic school, 1 Japanese Buddhist school, and 1 Jewish school, but no Hindu school. And if we can make a entry there, and that will be, the theological school has one advantage, that they not only teach about religion, but a practicing scholar also is an accepted norm. So a person can be a scholar as well as he can be practitioner, which is a little bit of a taboo in the mainstream university. Although there, with the effort of the persons like Dalai Lama, there are at least about 14 Buddhist chairs, and most of the people are initiated Buddhist professors. So anyhow, we took up that very seriously, and the then Executive Vice President Kalyan Vishwanathan, who used to be the vertical global head for one of the practices of TCS, he took a 1.5-year sabbatical from his job, and we raised $630,000 to launch an MA program in Hindu Studies at GTU. And thereafter, one of the businessmen in Bay Area came forward. He said, I will make a commitment to donate $4.4 million to launch a PhD program in Hindu Studies. So Meera and Ajay Shingal Center for Dharma Studies is the name of the center. For the last almost 6 years, a regular PhD program also is going on. Probably is the only fully accredited MA PhD program in Hindu Studies. Accredited means a student can get a federal government loan, number one. Number two, the courses can be transferred to another mainstream university. And number three, a person who graduates from here can get a job in a mainstream university. Unless you have accreditation, these things cannot happen. So that seems to be going reasonably well. So that is one of the success stories of DCF. DCF also, the dean at the University of California, Irvine, what's called in short UCI, said that they have a plan whereby if you bring in to create an endowed chair of $1.5 million, we will match another $500,000, and we can create a $2 million chair on a defined theme. So we negotiated and signed a gift agreement that our chairman that time was Dr. Usha Khan Thakkar. So he wanted to create a chair on his name with the name of DCF also. Arma and Usha Khan Thakkar and DCF chair in Vedic sciences. And that the initial installment was given. It was a 2-year commitment to pay the entire $1.5 million. And then we thought that maybe we should also reach out to our other dharmic traditions. So we reached out to the Jain community. They're super enthusiastic, and they immediately raised $1.5 million to create a Jain chair. And there is a very well-known cardiologist by name Dr. Harvinder Sahota Sardarji, and he agreed to create a Sikh studies chair on the name of his mother. And the DCF was also, the community said that we will like to create a second chair, another chair on the name of Swami Vivekananda. So Swami Vivekananda chair on the study of contemporary India and Indian diaspora studies. So the whole idea was the entire civilizational journey, right from the antiquity, from the Vedic period up to the current period, that whole thing can be studied in one single university, along with our other traditions like Jain studies and Sikh studies. And there were also some conversation that has begun to talk with Dalai Lama, etc., to see whether we can create a Indian and Tibetan Buddhist studies, and also a Zoroastrian studies or a Parsi study. So it will be probably one of the unique single university center where all the different spiritual traditions of India can be studied. Unfortunately, even after a public ceremony and after the gift agreement was formally signed, some of our Indian leftist faculty, they raised a slander that these are all Hindu fundamentalists with Godra, etc. The dean got scared and he established a committee in which again the same professors were appointed. And then they recommended that the Jain and the Sikh study chair should be maintained, but the Hindu study should be scrapped. And without even giving an opportunity for any conversation. So a law firm was hired and the law firm continued for several months. And finally, they said, acknowledged that it was our mishandling. Our dean has stepped down. We are going to hire a new dean and we are willing to renegotiate a Hindu chair. But there is a background in the American universities that a professor is appointed only by 100% unanimous approval of the entire faculty of the School of Humanities. And there's a fair number of people who are very antithetical and hostile to the Hindu spirit. So we thought that, because at that point, Rajiv Malhotra and persons like him were also suggesting that still the mainstream universities are not quite ready, and any resource investment will be more like feeding the crocodile, and maybe it needs to be a little bit more further carefully thought through. So at that point, we slightly decided to shift the focus for a while by funding individual scholars and by trying to see whether we can create our own institution. And when Hindu University of America, at the inspiration of one Swami Tilak, was initiated in the state of Florida and was registered in 1992, but because of lack of resources, it continued to have a relatively low-key existence. So the DCF decided that we'll raise $1 million within a year and we'll revitalize. And our president, then Kalyan Viswanathan, he decided to quit his job. We together traveled some 22 cities in about 25 days, raised over $400,000 within a month, and the remainder $600,000 we raised within a year. And now it is an online university, but reasonably progressing well. It has close to about over 2,500 students have gone through the process, and there are about 70 MA and PhD students. There are 3 major verticals: one MA in Sanskrit studies, one MA and PhD in Hindu studies, and there is one more I'm forgetting. And there are over 100 courses, and there are close to about 40 regular, and as well as those who come and teach a course. They are not fully employed, but there are about 6, I think, full-time employees also.
Full-time faculty, I guess.
Visiting
so
scholars.
People like Vishwa Adaluri, Joydeep Bakshi, Kundan Singh, and Indu Vishwanathan, whole bunch of people. So very good, they're very decent professors. In addition to that, some book grants like Professor Makran Paranjape of JNU wanted to write a couple of books, so we funded him. We also funded some of the research work of Joydeep Bakshi and Vishwa Daluri and Kundan Singh. We also gave some PhD student at Cambridge University. So all those some efforts are going on, and at that point we thought of reorganizing. So that is when our Shrikant Palkarji came in as the new president. He had a very wonderful, lucrative job, and he quit that, and now it's almost full-time devoting. A new executive committee, a new board of directors. We don't call board of directors. It's being a non-profit organization. We have tradition of calling board of trustee, and the amazing level of expansion of the scholarly network that he has done. Of course, he will be sharing two very important initiatives and projects that are currently going on. There are many other minor points that can be highlighted as the important achievements of this year, but maybe rather than me going too long-winded, too long, I would like to pause here and maybe give you an opportunity to whatever comes to your mind as a more important aspect that may need to be highlighted.
No, firstly, congratulations, sir. I think this is, great, wonderful achievements in establishing chairs and raising, motivating the community, Hindu community in US to raise money, not only for narrowly Hindu chairs and studies, but also the larger Hindu, domain, if you like, including Sikh, Jain, Baudh. So that's just wonderful to hear all this. I had a few questions maybe, and I'm a little bit of a cynic, when it comes to the Hindu community raising or donating money for non-temple or non-emotional causes. I don't know. Do you remain a cynic, or do you have a really good positive outlook? And the question is for you and
it is a challenging job, but I think with certain conviction and if you deeply feel convinced and you articulate it well, I'll just give one or two small examples. There is a medical doctor by name Rakesh Gupta in an area called Hemet, one of the suburbs of Los Angeles. And he's also the chairman of a Riverside temple. So he's heard about me and he said that, why don't you come and meet our board, temple board? So I went there and he said, why don't you make a presentation about why this work is important? So in 20, 25 minutes, I gave a brief overview presentation. And somehow he was so touched by the need for Hindu community to take some initiative in this area. He said, Manoharji, I am willing to commit myself personally $1 million. You find out where I should start a university. And then this was like 2015, just after the UCI episode. So there is a major university called UC Riverside, University of California, Riverside. There is a religious studies department. The head of the department is a Sikh gentleman who somebody about 15 years back established a Sikh study chair in that university. So we went and met with them. I arranged a series of meetings. And the donor said that at least do I have some modest involvement in ensuring that the type of person who is appointed is reasonably a Hindu sympathetic person. So the dean said that, no, I mean, we have that you give money once a year, we'll give you a brief reporting about how things are going on. But beyond that, in order to what they claim, quote unquote, the academic autonomy, we do not want any involvement of the donor. So then he said that I'm not feel motivated to invest all my hard-earned money for a place where I'm not even sure what type of person is appointed. Another person who has one Ushakant Thakkar, who later on became the chairman also. Somebody introduced me. He's the largest kidney specialist in Los Angeles with 18 doctors working for him, 18 dialysis units. So I had a lunch meeting with him, and he heard whatever I was sharing, and he said, I was about to retire from practice. I was searching for where I can use my time. And I feel that maybe I don't need to spend too much time in searching. I will join you. I will join your team. I will. But he said, I have one condition. I usually watch and closely observe for 1 year. till 1 year, I will not give $1 of contribution also. I just want to watch. I said, I give you a promise. I will not ask you for a single dollar till you feel convinced further that you are, and then he is the one who ultimately agreed to give that $1.5 million for creation of the first
Sure.
chair at UCRY. So I think I'm for just by contrast, there are 12 6 study chair in US and Canada. And there are 22 chairs going up to 24 now within matter of 6 to 12 months of Jain study chair. When we started at UCRY effort, they had only 2 or 3 chairs. The level of responsiveness of the Jain community and Sikh community is at a much higher level for whatever reason. Hindu studies is like almost like pulling the teeth. It is doable, it is possible, but it's not easy. It is an uphill battle still. Maybe a day may come when the Hindu community also, I think it's very individualistic. I mean, somehow they say 100 years, one Jewish professor said, Manoharji, 100 years back, that's what we did. And very strategically, we planned about how to position Jewish community in the media, in the think tanks, in the administration, in academia, in a variety of locations where we can influence the American decision-making process. You guys are doing it, though late you have started. I'm very happy. I genuinely anything we can compare notes, we can share some our experience, etc. So they persisted for 100 years. We are not as lucky in terms of evoking a very vigorous response as much as Jain community and Sikh community. And it's a worth studying topic. What psychological makeup of the Jain and Sikh community that seems to evoke that type of response. At least I know all the key players in the Jain community, and the level of consistent hard work for the last 20 years they have done. There is a platform called International School of Jain Studies, and every year they take some 35, 40 university students and professors to India for a 6-week orientation program. And the amazing level of one guy was Sulekh Jain, after he is retiring from a job as a MIT doctoral scientist. 20 years consistently he's working for the Jain cause. So that level of sustained commitment for building up, and the definitely Jain is much more generous in donating for the Jain cause.
Yeah, I have just come to believe that we ask far too many questions on, how the money is going to be used.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I face that all the time. I'm forming a, Hindu fund, and probably at some other time we'll talk about it. This is not the appropriate time to speak about it, but as I go out, I'm starting to raise money. But even for our own project, Sangam Talks or whatever, hardly find any donors. I basically get 3 or 4% of the entire money that is required to run it, and I have to self-fund all the time.
Can I just
Yes.
add a quick point?
Sorry for being cynical here, but
No, it's not cynicism. It is, your experiences, and Manoharji also shared, right, in detail.
Yes.
That is true. Like, it is not, that you just go and people are waiting with their checkbooks. That what do you want
I
the
do
money
think
for?
some cynicism is necessary also. It's a little bit of a shaking up of the Hindu community. I don't know how much money will you save for yourselves and for your children and for grandchildren endlessly when the civilization itself is at stake. We have in India, we have just a decade and a half before, we enter a civil war type situation. And I mean, the Hindu community here, the rich HNIs here and internationally are basically sleeping, in my view.
That is definitely a broader view, but just 2 points I do want to mention. One is, Manoharji touched upon that, is what is happening is, if people see what is the strength you have, then they are more willing to, like, even when this initial effort was made that here is a chair we want to do. So we were able to raise the money that, okay, here is what you're going to do. We will probably contribute. So one thing is, if there is very clear understanding of what the outcome is going to be. You have the strength about it. Now, that's where your point about asking too many questions comes in, because some of the work we are trying to do, which is, or you are trying to do also, is abstract in nature. So if you are going to ask like exactly what will happen, it's going to evolve, because we have had questions like, okay, you might have supported a research, but what is the use of that? So those kind of questions become little bit, as you said, uh, challenging, because I mean, what is the outcome of research is it's not like, it's not
Absolutely.
a product we are creating for tomorrow.
Honestly, so how much interference should we do? Can we do? How much influence? There are people, I'm sorry to say this, who with a little bit of donation want to sit on boards of the organizations they donate to. It's a completely ridiculous idea in my view.
Just I'll take one half a minute that you taking such a brilliant initiative and sticking with it and putting your own time, effort, energy, imagination, and resources to make it happen. With what Sangam has been able to provide a platform and bring in such a collection of ideas is extraordinary. And I think is a known name, is a known phenomena, and maybe you started when even it was not so populated with this type of effort. Now many others also have been attempting to do that. So it is no ordinary contribution. Unfortunately, the monetary input has been not correspondingly proportionate, and how to handle that situation.
Correct.
We
Not
got
that
to
I've
do
gone and raised it, just to talk about myself, not that I've gone and raised, seek much money for our own projects. However, for the projects we fund, so we fund a lot of other projects, other people, organizations, and it's been very hard. And what pains me, in fact, I was writing today, if you don't mind me interrupting with, one more
Please.
time, I was actually making a presentation for the Hindu Fund, and the opening slides, actually I call out that there's a permanent funding crunch, and yet most of these change makers who are working to revive the civilization are constrained by lack of funds and the indignity that they have to face during fundraising with 1,000 questions on propriety. This adds salt to their wounds. This is the words I was actually trying to use. I'm actually making a presentation next week on Monday, my first or second presentation on the Hindu Fund. So I'm actually articulating this, that please stop asking questions and put money where it's needed without asking 100 questions on propriety, on how is it going to be used, whether this will have impact and this and that. The Sikh community and Jain community are not asking those questions. They are going ahead and putting the money where it is needed with a very long-term view, and not short-term thinking of whether I will be able to influence.
I think we had a fantastic overview of why DCF was started and what were the formative years, the journey about how do we work with the academia at various levels, including going to the universities to form chairs, then going on to revive, a very strong body like the Hindu University of America, which is doing amazing work, having, more than a couple of thousand students, and that work is continuing. Now, last year, we just took stock of this whole situation as to it's been about 10-12 years since DCF was initiated primarily by Manoharji with a few other people. And then what has changed in the last 10 years? So a few things have changed. Some of them haven't changed. And of course, what has changed is there are more concerted efforts to misguide or misinform about what we call as our dharmic frameworks and so on. Also, technology has become very, very ubiquitous, which means that everywhere information reaches much faster even than 10 years ago. And then a few other factors we looked at. Based on all this, the first thing I'm just going to bring up is, this is what we talked about, what is the mission of DCF. So the fundamental role stays the same as Manoharji articulated, working with the academic and intellectual people, help in promoting research, building institutions and the infrastructure for all those. And this is in the contemporary context, because the idea is This is not trying to figure out what our history was and just recording it and bringing it. That is definitely one part of the whole thing. But also, what is the use of all that? So that's where the last part, that it is for the benefit of the whole world that we use this knowledge. That's how we are going to do various activities. The quick part I want to bring up is with whom. So what are we going to be doing? So it is like, who do we work with? Who do we work for? What are the different personas in this dharmic ecosystem that we want to focus on? And so if you see there, we have said 4 different categories. Experts are the academics, the intellectuals, who really are doing the deep research, the deep work, and coming out with things that probably are important and useful and may reach the end user, whom we are calling the enthusiast, in the course of time. Then we have amplifiers, that is, the social media influencers, people who need to know that this is authentic, correct information, and they would help in reaching this information to a wider audience. And of course, patrons. So we work a lot with the experts. We work for enthusiasts as well as experts. And of course, the amplifiers. So this is the, giving some framework to what we are going to do in the coming time. Now, using these 2 things which I mentioned, the mission and the kind of people we are trying to focus on, we quickly came up with what are the activities that we will be doing. So as it happens in any such work, there's a bifocal aspect to the work. There are things which we are talking about, we'll keep doing, will happen, big efforts like Manoharji mentioned. Some people started 100 years ago and they are here today. If we started 12 years ago, accordingly the journey will continue. So some things will be seen in the next few years. What are we going to do next year? And that's where we have been focusing on 2 big activities which are happening now. One is accepting the fact, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that technology is ubiquitous. Technology is a very key driver in people understanding how the world functions, understanding about the world, which goes with understanding values, understanding dharmic frameworks, whatever you talk about. People will go to whatever. Today it is ChatGPT. In the past it was Google, and tomorrow it will be something else. So we focused on having an academic conference, a discussion around this interplay of dharma, the values that dharma represents, the ancient, proven, time-tested principles that we know work in various domains of life, and the digital age, all kinds of technologies. That is what we kind of put together, and we have organized a conference which will be happening in June in Atlanta. So what were some of the key ideas behind doing it? One is, we are not focusing only on academics, as in the people who are working in universities and professors. They are, of course, a key part of this whole activity, but then also researchers from all walks of life. So we have leaders from the spiritual organizations, we have individual researchers, we have people who are the movers and shakers in technology, who have thoughts on this. So all those people are welcome, and we will have a conversation which will really cause this activity to become an ongoing thing. So that's where it is organized, the conversations around these themes, and follow through with the conference with support for research projects. So we'll not just be doing a conference, great talk, thank you, now let's all go back to whatever we were doing. Try to create a cohort which will continue working on these ideas. The last quick point on this slide I would want to bring up is draw the attention to praxis oriented. So this is not a conceptual discussion, but this is also about the output will be something that is tending towards practice. These are the themes for the conference. Again, I'm not going to read all of these. They are available on the website of DCF. But these are the themes around which we invited papers. We have various panels conference. And it's very interesting because we have, I would say, modestly good response in reaching out to various people, and also the papers being submitted. Over 30 papers have been submitted so far already by, right from some undergrad students, 2 or 3 of them, to, of course, very experienced professors who are working on various areas listed here. So, in forming the advisory committee, the academic leaders who would guide the selection of papers, the defining of themes, the panel discussions, and most important, the activities beyond the conference. So, this is the team that we have who has been working with us throughout, and most of these people will be in Atlanta during the conference. In addition, what we are listing here is the people who are going to be in person present during the conference. There is a set of people who will be online because it was just impossible in a conference like this to have every single person be able to attend. But these are the people who will participate in the various panels and so on. Moving on, what are the outcomes that we expect from this conference? So some, as I said, praxis oriented. So we want models which will be helpful in applying the Sanatan and Dharmic values in the modern context. And especially when we say modern context, focus on technology. There are so many issues. What is the ethics? All of us, probably half the world, and not only the technology people, is talking about the bias of algorithms, for example. And then, of course, there is about the concept of privacy of data. And then there is some deeper issues about how technology and applications are designed and what will AI do. And this is not only the aspect of job loss or those things, but will AI become the driver? Will AI tell us how we understand the world? For example, we are having a panel on art, and the digital art has its own very interesting impact, other than just feeling that we can quickly get images drawn.
I actually had a question. How is the Dharma and digital context, these conferences, how does this fit into the DCF theme as explained by Manoharji earlier, which is to set up academic and strategic centers for furthering knowledge? So how do these two work together? They seem to be different
Right.
objectives.
If you look at the mission where it says, promoting the research, now what this is doing is, as I mentioned at the beginning, the ubiquitousness of technology. That technology is driving everything, even the understanding of Dharma, the outreach of what Dharma will mean to people is all being driven through technology. And at the same time, what we see is such a critical aspect of how we understand the world. Because Dharma is really about, different worldviews is one key part. And so if you understand the world through technology, and then you look at technology and find that the only, drivers for deciding whether some technology should continue or not lack any kind of what we would call the value-based assessment for it, other than the material impact of the technology. And which we are not negating. We are saying, of course, it's good technology if it solves some, like access to information is phenomenal. So that is great. But if people are supposed to use the technology which is changing their worldviews, then what are the guidelines? What are the guardrails for such a potent mechanism which defines my worldview? And I don't know. I mean, it's just the fact is it is being used by many people. That's how we connected digital with Dharma.
Can I just, maybe just I will compliment what Shrikant is saying, that we have chosen the deeper study of the impact or the interface between Dharma and technology as one of the focus area for the next few years, and then continue to draw some of the best minds who are working in technology field, but who also have a passionate commitment and interest and study of the Dharma. So ultimately, how Dharma also can be important guiding and shaping force in the future evolution of the technology and the challenges posed by the technology, whether it is protecting the civilization from the abusive use of technology, or how to enhance to the dharmic framework to be enriched through technology, and how dharma can itself contribute to the further future evolution of the technology. Multiple dimensions are there. So this is one of the focus area. This conference is just one milestone in that long journey for the next 5-10 years that we are envisioning among few focus areas. Dharma and technology has been the
Understand.
And I think, Rahulji, you bring up a very important question. Thank you for asking that, because apparently it looks like if we are just creating academic institutions, why are we talking about technology? So I will quickly move on to the second part, the second activity, and that is called Tejas. So here, the thinking behind this was, when we look at how do we introduce the Indian American population who reads, and the emphasis here is who reads. We are not trying to suddenly change people who can only read WhatsApp level messages. And that's great, but we are talking about people who read. There is not much knowledge about the Indic books. And when we say Indic books, we are not talking about straight away reading spiritual volumes or whatever, but just, do you know that there are so many wonderful authors and books? And I had some very interesting, I'll not go into those here, but I had some very interesting test cases I could do with groups of 50 or 100 people, that certain authors are very well known, and then if I asked some Indian name, they had no idea about who this person was. And so how do we increase that interest? And so we first of all looked at identifying what we will do, and one of the thoughts was to create an interesting book reading competition through which we instigate people, we motivate them to read books and do things which will be contemporary, which I will go into. So read the books. So as you see the picture here, it is one of the cohorts is the 14 to 18-year-olds, the high school group, and then the other is the 19 to 35, so undergrads and early professionals. Those two cohorts, and we identified 4 books for each of them. They were given the names, they got the books, they could form teams of up to 3 people, so individuals or up to 3 people in one team, and then they would read these 4 books over a period of about 4 months. And as they did that, they would create a number of outputs. So if you see here, so far we have in this first year, we have had over 100 teams, close to 200 participants, and what they were creating in the first round, and this first 2 rounds are for all the participants. So in the first 2 rounds, they created things like YouTube shorts, memes, a booklet. Booklet is, we give them a prompt about a book and then they write 10 to 15 pages explaining that. So the booklet is not like, okay, read the book and create a summary. Similarly, in round 2, they do a podcast, they do a Gen Z speak and spot it. And for one of the cohorts, we just completed the second round also. And it's very interesting to see the kind of creativity and the perspectives that we are getting from people when they are creating these YouTube shorts, or even just this last Sunday, we got the Gen Z Speak. Very, very interesting creations on how to explain the concepts that we ask them to using the prompts. So this is the thing going on. On the right-hand side, you see the total list of the authors whose books we have given to this cohort, 4 to one and 4 to the other. And other than Dr. Vivek Murthy, all the other authors, including Sanjeev Sanyalji, were kind enough to give us time and have a session with the participants, explaining what their purpose was in writing the books, and also explaining and answering questions about many other things. Like Bhaskar Kamleji has written the book on mathematics called The Imperishable Seed. And people asked him that, you are a IIT PhD person, and did you have to study Sanskrit? And how did you really authenticate whatever was said? And that was very interesting. The 14 to 18-year-olds asking about how do you do research if you find something. And so that was the whole purpose of having these interactions. The authors have worked with us in giving the prompts for the various challenges that we have presented to the participants. And finally, for the final event that is happening in Atlanta, some of the authors will be present physically. So these are the different challenges that they have submitted. We got them the information on this. So there were expert sessions. So for YouTube shorts and booklets and Memify, the people who are actually doing it, well-known and expert people conducted sessions on how do you create a good YouTube short, and not the technology piece, the content part. So that kind of activity they did for both of these. Moving on, then comes the final round. So these, based on these 6 things, which all 200 participants are trying to complete, we are going to select the top teams from both the cohorts. So about top 5 teams of the 14 to 18-year-old and the top 5 teams or so of the other cohort, 19 to 35. They would be selected based on their performance in the first 6 things. And then for the final in-person round, they will come to the same place where the conference is happening, and in parallel, in a separate venue, they would be having this final round where they'll do 3 things. They'll have a Jeopardy, which doesn't need any explanation. Then just 3 minutes, which is like just a minute. They'll be given a prompt about a book. They'll have 3 minutes to think about it, and then they have to talk and explain that, whatever we have asked them to. The last one is act it out, where they'll be given a concept, they'll be given about 10 to 12 hours to think about it, and then they come back and they do something which is an acting. So they don't come back and say, I'm going to give a speech on it, but they're going to do either an advertisement or a skit or whatever else, but they'll have to perform to explain that concept. And therefore, we give them about 10 to 12 hours to prepare. And so this will be the final 3 things that the selected teams will do. And that will help us identify, it's a competition. So ultimately there will be, the winners and the first prize and so on. But what is also important is, again, our effort here is not to just have a competition and winners and it is done. So we are going to have an internship fair. This is where the authors come in. Some of the authors whose books were given, some other authors who are in the US and elsewhere, and who would also be judges. Therefore, they will be coming. About 6 to 7 authors are going to be there, and about 3 to 4 different organizations who will be creating. It will be like an internship fair, which means that the participants who did any of those 6 things and have good skills and want to do that further, these organizations and authors are willing to mentor them, work with them, so that they build those skills. And in the process, of course, they are understanding what they are reading, and they develop more of interest in those topics. There is a book writing workshop which Sankrant Sanuji is going to conduct for the participants. And then also Sunanda Vasishtji is going to do podcast with the participants individually post the competition. And in that process, it is not about she's just interviewing them. She's going to work with them to learn how they could do better podcasts, because each of them has had to do one podcast for the competition. So this is the entire, set of activities that will happen at the same place. And people are welcome to attend already the local Atlanta. We have had very good interest from the community about the younger people. Can they come and watch this when it is happening, and so on. Now, our thought in having the Tejas finale along with the conference is because then this Tejas competitors can also be part of the conference and listen to all the various activities, the different talks that happen in the conference. And so if you see here, I've just put the schedule primarily to talk about it this way, that, 14th, for example, all of them arrived. They are in the plenary session and in the inauguration, where, people like Raju Malhotra ji, and then the first set of professors will be conducting the plenary session on the worldview and technology, and so on. And similarly, throughout the remaining 2 days, other than the parallel sessions where each themes will have their own paper presentations, we are trying to make it like the participants of Tejas also can attend a plenary. So this is the high-level schedule for those 3 days. The event is happening at Georgia Tech, And that's where we expect a very powerful set of discussions happening, which is also useful and very contemporary. That
Excellent.
is what we are trying to achieve.
Excellent.
So-
Congratulations. I will try and get this video out ASAP so that some, before the dates, before your June dates, people can
Yes.
watch the talk and participate. Is there a message in conclusion? Is there a message for the viewers? Something that you'd like to say, or you want any support from the viewers?
Yes, Manoharji, do you want to?
I think ultimately we would like to motivate and inspire even youngsters who can aspire to pursue either an academic career in doing BA, MA, PhD, and entering the teaching career or a research career, or some independent scholars also taking up an area and then spending their lifetime in doing some sustained, deep work that is badly needed, and ultimately create an ecosystem or an environment where all such activities are appreciated, supported, and nurtured. So both the resourceful people in the community and young and creative minds, we have some spark of some passion for understanding the value of what a rich heritage we have inherited and how to pass it on by even further enriching it. So those are the few thoughts that come to my mind.
I think
So-
what we expect from these two events that are happening is to build that interest that, it is what, as Manoharji said, doing research in the areas of, dharmic values, humanities to speak more broadly, and encouraging people to do that by listening to what is possible, what is the use of all those things. Because one of the things we always get is, okay, but what will I do if I study all these things? So there is definitely an opportunity. We clearly expect to build a cohort of academicians who would continue research, and we plan to support them in doing meaningful research in these areas, which will, help make technology a more balanced tool for everybody, if we look at the output of the conference straight away.
Wonderful. Good luck for the conference.
Thank you.
And my appeal to the Hindu community in US would be that the work that you're doing, especially, for raising money for setting up chairs and all, that is such strategic work. I hope you get a lot of backing, from the Hindu community in the US. With that wishes, thank you very much.